forums. There you go. David Cantor. Here we go. Resolution, District 78, Georgia House of Representatives. Let's see. It's resolved to recognize January and August as Neurotherapy Month.
What?
I don't know. It's interesting. I need to read it more carefully, but it looks like they were successful in doing some interesting lobbying.
That's 2 months.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about it. Yeah, it's interesting.
And then I'll just drop my little link in here.
Mm-hmm.
I just got my notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that.
It's comparative efficacy of neurofeedback, TDCS, and TMS. The future of therapy for adults with ADHD. It's a catchy title.
Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can drop it in, see what I can see.
Well, here, scrape it.
Yes.
Grok, what's it say?
Comparative. Right. Give it to Grok. So
No,
we got
say,
all the pop-ups.
He's punning it to GPT.
Yeah. No, it looks like a beefy article. Let's go ahead and hand it over to the AI and see what it says.
Uh-huh.
Let's see here. It's not that I won't read these papers myself. It's just that I can.
Well, you got to know which ones you're going to read later.
Yeah.
Main findings: TDCS showed most consistent effects, especially when using anode at F3, cathode at F4, and 2 MA current. So that milliamps. Suggests stimulation of prefrontal cortex, helps emotion and attention regulation. RTMS results were mixed but promising when applied unilaterally on DLPFC using deep coils at high frequency. That's the big magnet, right, Joshua?
Yeah, TMS, yeah.
Yeah. Neurofeedback suffered from, well, hold on, Anthony's going to want a piece of this.
Sure, yeah.
Hi, guys.
Anthony!
I'm going to lack video for a little bit while I'm rearranging things.
You're good.
But yeah, what's the topic? How's it going, everybody?
Comparative meta-analysis of neurofeedback, TDCS, and TMS.
Oh, what did it find? That does sound like a really good study.
I'm kind of digging into it right now.
Hold on.
Oh,
I was reading what Grok told me.
Who, did Grok discover this study or something like that?
No, good old Google. You know, Google alerts neurofeedback, and this one came up.
That's
something
a good idea.
Other than what do they usually come up with? The neurofeedback market for 2025 is $60 million, and it's 6 members. Yeah.
That's what you usually get, but
stable results with neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback.
Yeah.
Suffered from why do they do this to it? Suffered from methodological weaknesses in many studies. Hard to draw solid conclusions, but some effects seen on theta beta ratio regulation.
Yeah, that's that study that Jay always talks about. That's now considered invalid or whatever. Where FDA approved theta beta ratio as a biomarker in ADHD.
Yep.
But Jay is saying the kids are sleeping so little that marker is no longer really used by a lot of, or not. It's not recommended to use that.
The research that Jay's citing is by a meta-analysis by Martijn Arns, and it's specifically that we sleep 3 hours less than we did 30 years ago. Anecdotally, in discussion, the discussion moves more towards LEDs and microplastics being the culprit, but nothing conclusive, and that's all just discussion based.
Well, that little thing I sent, the article, the link that I put in there, very interesting. Joshua, do you want to put any of yours in here, and we can discuss? Or Anthony, you had one you were looking at
research.
Well,
man, I've been doing a deep dive onto alcoholism and neurofeedback all day. I probably put 7 or 8 hours into reading research papers today already. I
What
haven't had a single client
prompted
today.
that? Or
Oh,
what'd you
I'm building a
learn?
class. I'm building a
Oh,
class.
cool.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
this
I'm
the
almost done.
phenotype class or it's specific to
Yeah, I'm
alcohol?
going one by one, trying to do the absolute best that I can.
Oh, wow.
Trying to commit like a whole month, you know,
Mhm.
dozens of hours to each phenotype.
Wow.
You know, it's there's a lot more content than you'd expect out there. There's a lot more
Yeah.
research than you'd expect.
How do you do that, Joshua? How do you not suffer from confirmation bias? Oh, that looks like, or that, like, what in your
Well,
8
I mean,
hours?
that's kind of like, and I think Anthony actually ran the research. The research paper across that I'm going to reference. That you can always check your
Mhm.
biases against just an AI software, and it's not foolproof. Like him and I think we discussed this, Anthony, where I was like, well,
Mhm.
you know, I'm a little bit leery because you know, if we went back in time 20 years ago and we had the same AI software, it would have condemned all the conspiracy theories that ended up being true. And so you have some problem with it,
Okay.
in that it's going to tell you what is
Mhm.
reasonably true and not true based off of like
Uh-huh.
basic reason. But
Mhm.
again, that doesn't mean it's right. But I do think that it's
Mhm.
proper to orient yourself, because the alternatives are an indefinite rabbit hole that is not good. So when you're doing, you know, any kind of bias check, it's useful for that.
Mhm.
I think, Anthony, do you remember that study that you gave me?
It was specific to AI helping with biases or something?
Yeah, that M's curve biases. Mhm,
I know what it was. Yeah, that was a
mhm,
study where they found that it could persuade people
mhm.
uh against conspiracy theories, essentially.
Sure.
But that
I
that
use it
might be an
more
example
general than
of
that, though.
balancing or something. Oh, I
Mhm,
know, I know.
mhm,
And I was gonna say, yeah, so every time I think about, I hear this a lot from people.
mhm,
AI is good at giving you like a 10,000-foot view, and
mhm,
it's good at like checking your mistakes, not
mhm.
checking,
Yeah.
covering your bases. That's what I mean to say.
Mhm,
So I think it could be good. Yeah, like, well, these studies only have 30 participants or whatever, like it's
mhm.
the little things that humans forget. And I've heard that from doctors, like,
Yeah.
remember to check all 5 things on their labs, and
Mhm.
it's not like they didn't know that, but they're humans, so they can forget. So yeah, I
Right.
think it could cover your bases at a minimum. That sounds good
Mhm.
on
And
research.
it's not that you can't find flaws with the AI software, but if
Yeah.
you're gonna compare it to humans, it's gonna come out smelling like a rose sometimes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the on average it might be a little better than a human. I was going to
Yeah.
say a study came out. I didn't look at their methods, but it was this week, and what it said is AI seems to on average sort of confirm your biases, but it didn't say it's like egregious level, but it says
Mhm.
that it tends, obviously it'll
Mhm.
disagree sometimes, but it tends to want to like tell you you're right or find common ground or what have you. So
Do
also
you
just
think that's
keeping
true
that in
about all of
mind.
them, or
Yeah,
do you
go
think
on.
that's just true about, some that are programmed that way?
Well, I don't have
Mhm.
that experience where it's always telling
Mhm.
me what I want to hear. And I think
Mhm.
it'll say
Yeah.
things like, yes, these two things may be related, but then, which is leaving a
Mhm.
door open that I could be wrong. But the other,
Depends on how you ask, I
I
suppose.
I have friends that they will tell me about their AI, and
Mhm.
the AI sort of does seem to validate, but they're basically, yeah, it seems like the longer you
Mhm.
can like haggle with it, the more it'll agree
Mhm.
with you. That's the sense I'm
Oh,
getting.
absolutely,
Go on.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's no doubt true. When
Yeah.
I use AI software to check against my bias, I'm usually asking it
Mhm.
questions that are fairly unfavorable to my position. So
Good,
I'm going the
good,
opposite
yeah.
direction in an attempt.
No,
So, for
that's
example,
awesome, yeah.
I was doing a parenting class, and I
Mhm.
had this like giant, I don't know, it was like a 40-page document that I was working from that had all the content in the parenting class, and I kept giving it back to it and said, what content am I missing to be well-rounded? And I thought
Oh,
that
that's
it would
smart.
just, yeah,
Mhm.
I thought it would keep spitting it back forever, because I thought that if you ask it for something, it will always try to give it you that. But I
Yeah.
was really surprised that by about the fourth iteration, and I
Mhm.
would clear the conversation so it wouldn't have any recollection of the previous request. So it wasn't like it
Yeah.
knew that I was asking it for the fourth time.
Interesting.
Um, but I basically said, look at all the relevant research around parenting conflict skills. Sorry, I misspoke. It's couples conflict skills. And look for any gaps in the literature against this document that I'm working from. And after about the fourth run, it just said, no, it looks like you have everything covered. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, it can just agree with you if you ask it for criticism. And I wasn't sure if it would ever even do that.
So it seems more fair because you almost asked it to disagree and it didn't want to or something.
It said no, there wasn't anything significant that must be added in order for it to be well-rounded.
Well, it's getting better every day. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So look at the major contributors to couples conflict skills, like Gottman and whatnot.
Well, this is good news. And
Yeah.
I'm
now, I don't think all AI is created equal. That's the problem. It depends on how you train it. So,
my 2 cents is you have to use them all and play them all against each other.
Sure.
I'm dead serious because I see it like I'm talking to it like it's a person. I'm like, hey, GPT, this is what Grok said. What do you think? Hey, DeepSeek, this is what GPT and Grok said. What do you think?
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
I think I have 5 AI subscriptions.
Yeah. Which
I use them all.
What? Okay, GPT. You got Grok. You have DeepSeek.
I don't need all the language models.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's more like I've got one for word processing, which is integrated into the word processor, like WPS Word. It's hard to explain why you'd have that unless you've been using it a while, but it's very specific to word processing. And it knows the functions of the word processor, so I can ask it to do things within the word processor. It's kind of like if you hate Word and you're not a writer, this is quite useful because it will help you with formatting if you're dumb and you're not good at formatting. So there's things like that.
That's funny.
Then for image editing, you just can't really use the large language models for image editing. If you really want it to like expand an image or change something in an image without just mangling everything else in the image a little bit, you have to use specialized software for that, like Midjourney. And Midjourney is a separate skill. I've been using Midjourney since like 2018, long before people even knew AI was on the market. I was using it. And that's a skill. That is a skill. Like you have to be good at that.
You pay the $10?
What's that?
Do you pay the $10 or you wait?
I paid by the year. I don't know. I'm pretty sure the cost is coming down. This might be the last year that I use Midjourney because I suspect competitors will show up. But Midjourney is an old AI system.
I just canceled it. I'm like, I couldn't justify it because all the time that I'm putting in to get it created. Oh, here we go. Hold on, Hida. Welcome, Hida. Do we have any studies on effective neurofeedback on cerebral folate deficiency? I read it can cause seizures. Well, it depends.
I don't know if there are studies. If I need to like disappear for 10 minutes, I can go find out. But I know that Jay Gunkelman does talk about this, and it does correlate to lower voltage power maps. So if I see someone who has low power, I don't know if they have a methylfolate issue, but it is one of the subphenotypes that are not distinguishable, which is frustrating. And it's probably the most frustrating phenotype because you don't know why they have it. And you have to kind of try to like there's a study somewhere that I haven't been able to track down, but like supposedly there's a study that shows that there's engineers that are just more likely to have low power and they don't suffer from it. It's like a brain type of some kind, and it's not malignant or anything like that. And then you've got your methylfolate people who are just lower power and they need more ketones. And so you want to give them the methylfolate B12 and you want them to go on a ketone diet as well if you can, so get them more ketones. And that power apparently can come back, but you don't know if that's them. I suppose there's probably genetic tests that would increase the validity of that theory. So there's room for research on that one. And then there's other variants of low power that could be vascular driven. There's all kinds of potentials.
That's interesting.
Well, we're waiting for the next one coming in because if people don't ask questions, I have to go on my tangents. I do another podcast, and I had somebody on that was talking about autism and does sailing for kids with autism.
Cool.
And I'm like, how did you get into that? And I don't know if that's the safest sport that you want to get into with special needs kids, but that, and I don't even know if it's the right thing to say, special needs, but if you're in that type of environment, what he brought up was he took, there was a genetic test that he took specifically for autism, and I never heard anything like that. I know there's genes for everything, but is there a certain ADHD test that's out there that you can spit in a tube and get the results?
Not likely. I mean, you'll have a certain low statistical correlation with a lot of genes, but I don't think ADHD is one thing. I think ADHD is probably a dozen things, at a minimum, like at a minimum 12, which doesn't make it a very useful box if you think of it that way. Unfortunate. So it's a descriptive adaptation of diagnostics. Go ahead.
I've heard that there are websites you can send them your 23andMe and stuff like this, and they will pop it in. So, like for instance, there's something called the COMT. It's like a dopamine enzyme that breaks down dopamine or something like that, and like you can find a gene for that, and that predisposes you to like certain ADHD symptoms and stuff. So I think there is stuff out there, but I almost just think that the EEG would probably tell you more, because like the EEG is like the closest correlate. Like you can have the genes for something and maybe you don't have the symptoms, but if you're having the EEG, it's more. I think it's probably got to be more likely you're having symptoms. And we know more about that. I mean, we have a higher correlation. I think it's fair to say there's a higher correlation with symptom correlation between the EEG versus the genes. So the EEG is more informative of symptoms than the genes are. But there's a certain amount of relationship, maybe low, but there's a certain amount of relationship between genes and EEG. And it is true that Jay has said that all the phenotypes have been shown to be genetically related at this point.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of all that research, and there's more than I thought there was.
But it's true what Josh is saying. Like, so there's people.
Hold on, Anthony. Hold on. You're going in the tunnel.
Hang in there, robot. Come on, come back.
All right, come on. One more time, Grok. It's not really Anthony. Is that really you?
Oh no, we lost him. Okay, we can answer Haida's question. Haida asked about seizures in methylfolate, and I do think that this is maybe just discussion, and I don't think I can back this up. This is purely my experience clinically. Even though maybe I've been doing this for just under 15 years or something, I do see that when people are lower power, even low power fast, which is a totally different phenotype, but relates to lower alpha rhythm, there's a high comorbidity, meaning that we often see together instabilities. I don't always think this is I'm going to say, by principle, I usually have a stabilizing protocol as a preemptive protocol. But there's a part of me that really does wonder if just bringing up the alpha and bringing up the power is what stabilizes the system. So I have my reasons for believing that increasing the power just is inherently stabilizing. But destabilizing the system might be correlated with lower power, because it just seems to be. But that's my own personal observations. So yeah.
All that work that you did today on the alcoholism, anything pop up like, hey, wait, I think something's there, smoke and fire. Or what
I mean, it's all so familiar to me, except just there's a certain amount of catharsis and poring over. Okay, here's a double-blind study. Here's another double-blind study, and you're dumping them into slides and you're summarizing them. And this stuff is like, oh, I've read this study 4 or 5 times, maybe over the course of 10 plus years, or maybe this is a study like a Penniston study that I read 15 years ago. That I'm like, oh, I found this one. This is good. So there's some catharsis in just spending 7-8 hours reading, and you're using AI software to kind of find this stuff quickly, and then you're reading through, and it's kind of jogging your memory, and then you're dumping into your slides, and then you're kind of taking a bird's eye view, and you're like, oh, we've got so much good stuff, oh, we've got this study on a 3-year follow-up, and 77 or 70 some odd % of the people remain sober on a 3-year follow-up. You're like, yeah, great, you know. It just feels good to go over all that, and that's just the last thing I did. Maybe the last hour before I got on here was going over research. I don't know if maybe it just feels good.
I'm just wondering if anything popped up like on the craving side, because the study 10, 15 years ago, I mean, we didn't have the fat shots. We didn't have the tirzepatide. We didn't have the semaglutide and to help with the
craving. I mean, there's just generic studies like I think it was gosh, I'll just pull it up. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to find the right thing that I'm working from over here. I'm probably not going to find it because it's buried, but I do want to reference the correct author if I could, but there it is. I know back here somewhere it's talking about just general avoidance disorders, not disorder specific, but just general avoidance is reduced in one study by, part of me cares. I think was that the one by, Dalkner et al. In 2017. So it's just a smaller study, 25 males, 12 sessions of alpha theta, just generally found that avoidant personality characteristics reduced. Like, great. Like, who doesn't need that? Like, avoidant personality traits reduced in 12 sessions. That's awesome.
Hey, sorry about that.
Speaking of avoidant personality,
reducing avoidance, what is that going to help? Everything.
Yeah. How did that come up? That's my favorite topic.
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about things that I bumped into while I was preparing for the course today, and
good.
Some of the research that didn't even make it into my slides, by the way. That one didn't make it in there. It was like just bumping across like research on non-specific topics like avoidance traits were reduced in a study. It's like you could cite that on almost anything. Like like that's just general mental health stuff. We could slap that study into anything because that's very useful.
I was trying to talk to a friend about why I talk about empathy so much, and avoidant attachment is the reality is it's not just for everybody else, it's for the person too, because there's that famous Harvard study where they got all these guys, and it was like in 1939, and they tracked them for their whole life. And I think it's the same study that it's called like the Standingham study. It's the study where they said if you write your goals down, you're more successful. I think it's that study.
Yes.
But another thing that came out of it is that your relationships were the #1 determiner of your life satisfaction. Yeah. And so how are you going to have a fulfilling relationship if either you're not empathetic? Well, that's really what I'm talking about. If you're not fully connecting. So and avoidant attachment gets in. That's one of my favorite topics. It gets in the way of that also. So I agree with you, Josh.
Alpha theta neurofeedback, by the way. That's what they used to reduce avoidance.
Oh, I assume no, and
you assumed as much, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, the what is it? The thing I was saying the other day is theta down at FZ is like the key to avoidance. I've decided. Like I've seen it now several times. To where this relationship that had clammed up, suddenly things are flowing again, and so. But I'm sure there's other patterns
too. What if you did like theta down at FZ and then you did alpha theta to break up the unconscious learned behaviors?
I'm not. Yeah, I will just say I'm not. I don't know everything about alpha theta, but I'm not fully sold on it. Like I just remember
that's what the study was on. It was on alpha theta, not theta beta.
Interesting. So maybe it's a way to get to break down limiting beliefs or something.
Very much so. There's lots of studies that say that.
The one thing that gives me pause is that Yuri Kropotov said at Jay's conference, he said frontal midline theta is the only healthy theta rhythm, and he means Jay will always it's the phasic theta rhythm that represents memory access. It's not the persistent one. So anyway, so I always remember that, but there's room for other. I could be wrong on that, and I need to learn. Jury's out for me. But yeah, I could see it helping.
I don't hear the field talk much about phasic theta in the frontal midline. It's almost like they don't know about it.
Yeah, it's something I've only ever heard from Jay, but it makes total sense because on the one hand, there's papers saying that theta is associated with intelligence, and then on the other hand, there's papers saying it's associated with with OCD and ADHD. Meanwhile, this is better. When Jay suppressed it in addicts, the addicts got smarter. So how does that add up? And I think it's the difference between maybe it's resting versus state dependent, but maybe it's this phasic versus tonic. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if it would be considered a third group or not, but Jay's also referenced something called pulsed theta, which is a resilience finding, and that's in the frontal midline area as well.
You know what's so interesting about that? There was a study that came out, and I'm going to write that down. There was a study in the last week that said that it was last week, and it said that men that had more resilience had worse. This is what men with higher levels of grit reported greater cognitive difficulties, such as trouble concentrating, forgetfulness, and feeling mentally fatigued, despite their strong motivation to persevere. And then, so that got me thinking. And if you just ask Google, what's the EEG of grit or resilience, and it says theta. And so it's making me think of ADHD. These guys can't focus but they can also hyper focus. They can perseverate. That's the whole. Dr. Barkley talks about this a lot. He's like the big ADHD doc on. Jay is he denies the effectiveness of neurofeedback, so he's persona not, people don't like him as much in this field, but he mentions that ADHD people can have this paradox where they can't focus, but they also can't tear themselves away from things. And so that's
locked in, locked out.
Yep. And that sounds like resilience. They don't give up, so anyway.
Well, it's when something grabs them, they get locked into it. And that can be a frontal control issue. So you have difficulty controlling your frontal lobe. It's like you can lock onto something and have an ability to lock out of it. And you can have a difficulty locking into something when you want to. And that's just about you having the willful control over your own frontal lobe. It does kind of stick to something, but you can't unstick it. And it does not want to stick when you want it to stick. And that's all about the anterior cingulate gyrus. So how well is it working?
Locked on or locked off.
Yeah.
Anthony, what was the link you sent out earlier? Can you drop it in here and let's
okay, let me get it for you. But basically, Josh, it said I think you probably were sent it, but it said that anxiety is now the most common mental health disorder. And I've also heard ADHD, but they might have been using like undiagnosed people, but anyway, they're both a real high. I think this paper says that it said that anxiety went up a lot.
Dyslexia was number one, wasn't it?
What'd you say?
I thought dyslexia was number one like 10 years ago.
Really?
I don't know. Maybe it was for a brief period of time. It took the lead.
In your link, Anthony, I just thought it was interesting. The U.S. has 10% higher anxiety. I wonder how it correlates with GDP. I don't think France is very anxious.
Or working hours. We work more than other countries.
That's serious.
Yeah. Sorry. No, you're fine. They say on some level anxiety is survival skill. I mean, they say that it's related to intelligence. So I think there's an actual correlation. The idea being anxiety prepares you for threats, but the problem is modern life. We're constantly inundated with information and threatening information, and life is much more complex than so we maybe weren't. Anxiety can be helpful, but we weren't meant to be anxious all the time, because if you are, it practically kills you. Stress and inflammation and.
Yeah, there's something like an unquantifiable amount of energetic prompts that you could have for all kinds of reasons. And then there's an infinite amount of associations that you could have with that energetic prompt. The one that you relate poorly to, you will call anxiety. Okay,
interesting. Is that from the Coney Barrett or what? Not that's the Supreme Court.
It's maybe my own personal paraphrase.
Yeah, I like it. That the book on emotions that you've started to. Yeah. So that's cool.
You could say it's my own personal paraphrase of that topic. Maybe though, I don't know how she'd relate to what I said.
Yes. In other words, the people that they're not handling an emotion well, and so it becomes anxiety or a stimulus, or what is the idea there?
Well, we see studies where people will have kind of the same brain map as somebody with an anxiety disorder, but they don't complain about an anxiety. They just work a lot and they make millions of dollars. So like, well, what's going on here? And it has to do with usually ACE scores.
What? Oh, so does the guy that has more trauma become the millionaire, or the guy that has less trauma become the millionaire?
Less trauma.
Okay, yeah.
There's less reasons to negatively associate to that energy.
Oh, I like that. I mean, I don't like it, but that's interesting. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I get what you're saying. I get it. Yeah.
Well, this goes back to I brought it up last time, but the 9/11 responders, they needed, I read that study again. I didn't, Pete, the 9/11 responders needed 10 years on average to show improvement in their PTSD symptoms. We need to, like Jay, I think Jay will talk about PTSD can feel like anxiety or it causes anxiety. Like we need to figure out, I mean, I think in neurofeedback we can help, but as a country or as a planet, we need to figure out how to help people with PTSD, because this stuff is not, some people grow from it, but a lot of people don't, it seems like.
Well, the Ruth Lanius research that she's done in like the last 5 years is absolutely slapping. It is awesome. Like, I think she's just rocking it. I think she's kicking out like 2 studies a year. She's just got tons and tons of double-blind studies on alpha down, and it's looking really good.
I thought we didn't have enough data.
I doubt that's true anymore. I know that in the AAPB efficacy book, trauma was given an efficacy rating of 4 out of 5. I have my doubts whether it will stay a 4 when it's reevaluated, just because of Ruth Lanius. I think it'll get bumped to a 5.
Well, yeah, if all the military's using it and all of that. So, but I'm just wondering, it's okay if the data's there. Why isn't this taking off more?
Well, it is. Ruth Lanius has been touring with Bessel van der Kolk like for the last year.
Oh, good.
It is. Yeah, I mean, as evidenced by everything that you could expect to move, it's moving in that direction. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, he's in the news all the time, and so maybe her work through him will get more notoriety. I do think that PTSD will be another big, right now we're like seizures, ADHD, PTSD will be like right in there now, and that's fantastic. Excellent. And so the thing on that you mentioned alpha down, and what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now is, it's alpha down at PZ for trauma, isn't PZ also where we treat people with low power EEG and we try to increase the alpha there? So I'm trying to figure out how those two things might interact. Like,
sure, yeah, you're right, they do interact. I've done a lot of alpha down here at our clinic, and we probably see 100 people a week. So I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Do you then have to raise that person's alpha later on, like once they've addressed trauma for them? No. Like, how does that? How do you think about that?
If they're low power, they gain power, even if you train them down.
Oh, interesting. That's very wild. Yeah. Paradoxical.
Alpha, okay. Well, you could call it paradoxical. I always kind of tell my employees, like, visualize your alpha rhythm as kind of like one of those Bop It dolls you had when you were a kid. They're like filled with sand at the bottom, and they're like a balloon, like person, And if you kind of mess with them, they'll kind of self-righten. So when you're training alpha down on the back of the head, just right at the back of the head, center midline, parietal.
Yeah.
You look back 20 sessions, and the frequency reduced excessive coherence, which means it's more diverse as it moves around the brain. It became more symmetrical, and it increased in power. We didn't tell it to do any of those things.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And all those things are positive, but we didn't tell it to do any of those. And it generally does all of those. And so when you're teaching the brain about alpha, it just learns about alpha. Now, that's not true about other, brainwaves. This is just like an alpha thing, which is awesome. Like, don't expect to do that with anything else. In fact, do not do that with other things.
Yeah, I recall.
It's very dangerous with beta rhythms, like SMR. Don't do that.
Yeah, this is the one rhythm that behaves like that.
Yeah, you'll get a knock on your door from Corey Hammond if you do that. Don't do that.
Say, Corey Hammond, what's that about? Or sorry,
he publishes on the iatrogenic side effects of neurofeedback. So
that's helpful.
Injury cases.
A lot of billboards.
That's one of the reasons I come here, is I get a lot of names and people to write down for myself to know about.
You're gonna love the class when I drop them, Anthony.
Yeah, I
You're
would
gonna go nuts over it.
well, I'd be eager. I would be very interested to see that
Yeah.
class. And
Yeah, I'll have to give you an early preview.
I have a lot of notes, Josh. I should just offer is that I have been accumulating notes on basically like proving Jay's phenotype model, like just support, because it's out there and he knows about a lot of it, but just trying to catalog every time a study pops up that shows what Jay has been arguing. So if I see, anyway, if I do get to see this class someday, then I see a good study, I can send it.
How many notes do you think I have on phenotypes? Like how many pages worth of notes do you think I have?
It's got to be hundreds at this point, if I had to guess.
It's single spaced 11-point font, and I think it's 80 pages now.
Oh my gosh!
No pictures.
You're gonna need AI to read that thing.
Yeah, I know. I think it's 13 page bibliography.
Man, no wonder he needs AI to help with his word processing, Pete. That's cool.
So, while we're waiting for a question, because people are so quiet today, they're probably out in the sunshine across the country. Question: you pay a subscription each month to go to the gym to work out, and you're going to work on your core, you're going to work on leg day.
Should
if we were going to think that way about the mind, how would that work with a subscription? I'm going to pay Joshua a subscription each month, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to do something each month to work on. What would that look like, Joshua?
Yeah.
Or are we just going to attack the symptoms and that's it?
Well, I think like working at it from like a holistic standpoint, like peak performance instead. I like that idea. I like that idea.
I think I have an idea.
Go for it.
And it's not going to be precisely what Pete. So there's the company MindLift that you can buy a $200 headband, $250, and they do a subscription basis. I saw them at ISNR. They were there one year, and I gave them all of, speak of the devil, ISNR posts here.
There they are.
I gave them all of Jay's research, and I said, man, I would love if you could incorporate the phenotypes. So I would love if MindLift or anybody, they do some type of scan with a entry level price hardware, because even with cheap hardware, and then it just spits out, you have these 6 phenotypes. Here's your 6 protocols. And go to work, and you can be monitored. I didn't make any headway, but that's not to say they wouldn't pick it up in the future. But so.
Well, I'm just wondering. I mean, you pay. It's like January in the fitness field. It's so packed in January that nobody shows up in February. So you have all these subscriptions going. I mean, ideally, you want everybody to come in if you can handle the training and all that. Scheduling the techs.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
But like, what do you think it would look like? Start with alpha theta to work on.
I think if you're going to do peak performance stuff, I'm a big fan of some basic general wellness protocols and phenotype. So it's like, okay, we want vigilance regulation. You're going to bank heavily on things like SMR and maybe some specialty protocols like ISF. But you also want to look at their phenotype and say, well, maybe they're not symptomatic on the phenotype, but if we balance that even just a little bit more, maybe we could see cognitive improvement. We can see improvements on CPT testings. We can see improvement on other metrics. And so you have to have a pretty broad amount of testing. And then you're not going to see, 30-point gain in one direction when they're not disordered. You're going to see something like a 10, 15-point gain. And maybe there's a variability of 5 just because of what they ate and how they slept, so you're kind of like, okay, let's see what we can get. We're going to try to move the needle so much.
So Radar has a question that I was going to ask for him at some point. He says, and sorry to interrupt, guys, but
go ahead,
he says, do people have ab reactions? Do people that have ab reactions to neurofeedback find that with more training, they are then able to tolerate the protocols they couldn't tolerate before. And then I have a follow-up for that when Josh is done answering that one.
Sure. Well, I think the devil's in the details. So you want to know what kind of ab reaction they're having to the neurofeedback. And I think there's like 5 different types of ab reactions. I could probably list them off the top of my head, even though it's been a long day for me. But you want to know, do they need a counterbalancing protocol? Do they need the reward frequencies optimized? Is it just the wrong protocol, way off the wrong path? Do they have some sort of vascular ischemia and you overtrain them? Let's see, am I missing any? I might be. It's been a long day. But you really have to figure out like what is the domain of ab reaction that we're working with. Oh, sorry, trauma. So did you kind of perturb their nervous system and you kind of decompartmentalize some trauma? And if you have someone who has never processed significant, terrible trauma, and you go in there and you start exercising frequencies, the brain, for a few different reasons, depending on what you're doing, could just move into a house cleaning mode. And that's going to feel bad because you put them on a journey to fix that. And a lot of the symptoms from PTSD come from the brain's failed attempt to fix this kind of underlining, dynamic created in childhood. And so, again, identification of the reason for the ab reaction is going to answer that question. There are many cases where you can go back to the original protocol. So it just depends on why.
Wow. Well, I have a follow-up that was for, I won't say who they were, but they were a questioner on the show. And hopefully, I think they're listening, so this may help. They mentioned that when they have done, tried to correct their frontal slowing, I think at FC, their ACC, that I think they said they got dizzy and had trouble walking. And I asked somebody and another clinician, and they were not familiar, and I wanted to get Josh's take on something like that. What might that indicate?
I have to think about that one for a second. So this is the difficulty with having such a limited, like, I would ask a lot more questions. Yeah. and of course I can't tell you whether or not the answers to those questions would clarify the situation for me. Is it a symptom of over arousal? Because it could be for them. You wouldn't know until you asked 4 or 5 more questions. If you were a soda can, would you be too fizzy or too flat? Oh man, I feel way too fizzy. Oh, okay. Well, that's one question that could go quickly towards, hey, we've got to counterbalance this with some sensory motor rhythm training. You're just too amped up by frontal lobe suppression, from failure mode suppression. That happens with that protocol. So we need the other side of the vigilance regulation training. And that's oftentimes the case when you're doing frontal lobe training. But I can't say with certainty that the answers would lead me in that direction because I don't have the patient in front of me. So. Yeah. But that is probably one of the more likely outcomes, though.
Yeah, that they're too aroused. And so when they're suppressing the frontal lobe, they're getting more aroused potentially. And so that could indicate they need training to help them with that. What would the arousal training, not that this is diagnosing, but what in general seems
What's the
to
other side of the counterbalance?
What'd you say?
It's sensory motor rhythm training. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good to know.
Something along the sensory motor strip generally, usually central, sometimes like C4 for you get a little more mood. You can do something more specialized if there's a specialized need. But if I'm adjusting for a ab reaction, I'm probably going to come to CZ and just do one channel training. I'm not going to get too complicated if I'm trying to adjust for a over arousal.
Well, this came up because I know that Jay, he likes to start with SMR with a lot of people. And I get a general sense from practitioners, they tend to like to do the back of the brain, the motor center and back first. And like I've even heard Jay, don't suppress the frontal lobe until you are sleeping well. But I will say, I don't know if my friends are just lucky. I have a lot of people going through training with various people right now. And they were able to do frontal lobe suppression with no problem. And they didn't really do the whole SMR thing at the front. So
of course, do you know what percentage people need the counterbalance?
What percentage? 50%. Tell me about that.
50%.
So it's like half. So we could just be getting lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You just kind of watch them and you know that half of them are going to need it. Somewhere between 5 and 15 sessions, you'll just notice they're experiencing over arousal. Or if your base training is SMR, 50% of the time they'll need frontal lobe training
Yes.
to reduce the underarousal.
That is what Annette Rogel at ISNR found, is that half the time SMR creates side effects for people. Not to say that you can't do something, but maybe the 50% number is what Josh just listed about. They need something else half the time.
Yeah, it's the
Radar
frontal lobe suppression that perks them back up, wakes them back up.
Yes. Radar has a question here. Why do monopolar protocols feel stronger than bipolar? I don't know if Josh knows, has heard of that.
I have an opinion.
Tell me about that. What's up?
I think other people would probably disagree with me on this one, and I'm okay with a healthy dialogue or debate on this. But I see this. I agree with Radar. My perception, which is all that it is that you're asking for something more simple to the central nervous system. It's a simpler ask with less dimensions. When I do a sequential or commonly referred to as a bipolar montage, I'm basically subtracting a site on the head to a site on the head. So anything that's common between both locations is essentially erased. So it's like you're going to train up a frequency that is always only different in these two locations. And I'm not going to train any similar content. So it's a little bit more of a complex ask. And there's all kinds of interesting studies that suggest that kind of variability can be good. So like just because it's more complex ask doesn't make it bad, but it does make it maybe more complex. So there's good aspects to it, but there's also more complex aspects to it. Simpler tends to be stronger, in my opinion. I would not be surprised if others disagreed with me, though.
Yeah, I've heard someone on this podcast, I think it was Jay, even saying that sometimes monopolar can be better. I need to find out what they were saying. Radar had a follow-up. He said, I did a protocol where I inhibited 2 to 12 and 16 to 34, and it felt horrible.
Yeah, of course.
But it made him crash. So
Sure.
So I don't know what that is. Josh can tell us. And he said, but I got rid of the beta inhibit and it fixed the issue. So Josh, what does that maybe indicate? What could be going on there?
So Radar, there are exceptions, and I don't know your situation or story or your QEG or EEG data. I've never inhibited 2 to 12 on anyone because I'm not that brave. And I've done a lot of things. All my protocols are custom built to fit the needs of my individual client. I build them. There's no templates that we apply to our clients. We build them from scratch every single time for the client. And when we custom modify them, I am not brave enough to inhibit, did you say 12 to 15? Oh, you said 2 to 12. I misread. I'm sorry. I misread, Radar. I apologize. I was thinking 12 to 15. It's been a long day for me. I read too much today. So it's 12 to 15 that I would never inhibit. But 2 to 12 is what you dropped, it sounds like. Is that right?
Yeah, it sounds like
he got rid of beta. He got rid of 16. So 16 is too low. There's still compensatory frequencies that could go as high as 20 hertz, maybe 18, but you got to be really, really careful. Mid beta is kind of the 16, 15 to 20 hertz, and mid beta is still squarely in the compensatory frequencies that could be very much needed. And so my previous statement still stands, even though I thought you were saying 12 to 15, that all still applies to 20 to up to 20 hertz. Now it's not likely to apply from like 18 to 20, but it could. But you're at 16, and I think that's too brave. I wouldn't inhibit 16.
Maybe in other words, if he tries like maybe 20 and up, he sounds like he's saying that. Wow. So
yeah. It's simple. This is all this is what I understand. So this makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
You guys were
this is all within my experience. Yep. Great.
Well, good, Radar. I'm glad to hear, and feel free if you want to share. Have you been feeling better since you made that? Like, have you been noticing improvements or anything? I'd be curious. It's definitely a helpful one for a lot of people, that protocol.
And you can likely train it back up unless you've squashed it so low that you can't grab it anymore, which does happen. But if you didn't train it to death, you should be able to grab it and pull it back up. I wouldn't train up 16 to 34 though. I would be more selective on maybe 14 to 16 or something like that, or, I'd train that up. That's what I would think about. Now, I don't want to give radar advice, but I'm saying conceptually, this is what I would do in these kinds of situations.
Why might somebody want to train that? Because is that a arousal kind of thing? They want to get more arousal, alertness
for like mid beta. Yeah. Athletes like mid beta. Athletes come in asking for mid beta training. If they're going in for the Olympics, they're like, "Hey, my friend's got this mid beta thing. I want some of that." Like, that's going to put you like on go mode. So you don't want to train that down if it's a special skill. You don't want to train that down if they need it for some sort of compensatory mechanism, which is very probable at 16, 17 hertz possibly. But you do want to train it up if you're going into an aggressive competition and you want to be like wired. If you want to be wired, you can train up 16, 14, 15 hertz. Definitely. It'll make you kind of wired. You'll like it. Doesn't mean that you aren't going to want to slow that down a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily inhibit it. I would consider just shifting the training band down, after the Olympics are over.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Radar says, he's talking about the same thing, but why don't they do beta up at FZ for ADHD anymore? So maybe Josh,
too strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just end up getting a lot of salience, executive function. You don't want to lose all your alpha.
Like it's hard to be calm. Is that kind of the idea when you?
It really pulls up like large networks. Like when you train beta up at FC, you end up getting the whole salience network, and the whole executive network starts coming up. So you end up a large shift with the whole network. You see a big shift with the triple network theory. So it's like, if you're going to do that, you want to kind of like stop every 4 sessions and like see what's going down. Like, okay, have things moved? Like, do we need to stop yet? So you don't like reevaluate after 20 sessions. You reevaluate after like 4 or 6. So if I'm doing beta training at FZ, I'm a lot more attentive.
Wow. So Radar is saying,
yeah,
when I trained up beta at FC, it made my chest super tight.
It's activating. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very largely activating to your whole cortex.
This is why it's good. Stop. Yeah. Good job. And this is why supervision can be important. Coming in like Pete was saying, to a gym, and you're working out with a trainer, but for the brain. So
yeah.
I
don't know how to scale these things up. That's kind of why I'm excited about building some coursework. It's like, we could raise the bar of what the basics are. With really, really, really good coursework. But the way that I do my practice, they can't scale that into some sort of brain gym. It's too much work. It's too attentive. But we could take maybe 60% of it, and we could upscale it with really, really, really good coursework. But it'd have to be really good, which is
isn't half the problem that if you're dealing with a symptom, versus dealing with somebody without a symptom that just feels good, you can keep that client longer.
Say that one more time.
You're dealing right now. Things are changing, but neurofeedback is getting the cases that nobody else can cure.
Yes.
And that's the market for that, to grow off of that. I mean, that's you guys have the clinic, Josh. I don't, but I used to have one and I don't. Yeah. So my point is it marketing wise, is it easier to sell someone on keep feeling well versus taking a symptom and saying you'll get rid of it?
I think it depends on your demographic,
employed, money, insurance. Not insurance.
I think culture might play a role into that, and I think your demographic likely plays a role into that. I don't know.
Hold on, Radar's got something for you.
Yeah, you got questions here?
No, just a decent comment. A cult.
Yeah.
Who's
the great heart cult? Oh no. All right.
What's he talking about?
Somebody accuse us of this.
The e-meter, what is that? Heart rate or breathing, or
like a Gauss-Solvic skin response device or something?
Yeah.
They do their counseling with it or something. Yeah.
I think we got our cult. our cult that shows up every Wednesday,
So
6
I
p.m.
think the only difference is that I generally desire to see every single one of my clients be a really good example for a case study. Every single one. That's my goal. So we give them not just a
Nice.
QED, but we give them cognitive testing. So we give them 12 cognitive tests, like Stroop testing, the digit span. So a whole bunch of these regular, normal cognitive tests that are regularly used in the field of psychology. And then we give them questionnaires that are regularly used in the field of psychology. The cognitive tests have good test retestability, which means the scores are not supposed to improve if we do a follow-up. But what happens is the QEG improves, the questionnaires improve, and the cognitive tests improve. Whoa, that's exciting. And the goal is essentially to fuss over every single client until we figure out something that works for them. And we're generally fairly successful, but you can do better than research if you aren't stuck to a treatment template. You can fuss over clients more, and you can increase your success rates beyond the research levels. And research can look really good if you know what you're applying. If you're applying an evidence-based protocol, you've got really good outcomes that are 70-80% successful with different things. And you can do better than that if you're attentive and you're not getting complacent, and if you're fussing over them. So
marketing wise, thinking wise, if we can look at it just like when you have to get your annual physical, you have to get your baseline blood tests and EKG and all that stuff, and you just do it. Okay, great. I feel good. Keep going. And I think everybody has to think that way.
Preventatively.
Yeah.
Well, and I like the idea of having an annual QEG, just because if something goes wrong, you'll know. If you have a bad concussion or a car accident, that data becomes very useful all of a sudden. Maybe even in a court argument potentially. We might have to get better if the industry starts to catch on and gets really good at arguing against our data. We'll invite you have to invite Richard Adler to come talk about forensics.
Hey, so let's see. I'll give it a
shot.
shot.
You might want to write it down. He'd probably come on the podcast. He's a great guy.
All right.
Wes Center, he partners with him on as well.
Joshua, how's the book coming? I ask you this at the end of the show. Yeah, all of them. What do you got?
Oh, I'm working on a book for my kids, and then I'm working on a workbook for the class, and then I've got a book that I published on Amazon called Neurofeedback: A Beginner's Introduction. Second edition. It's just a very, very, very simple walkthrough that's absolute basic, and it's designed to be as affordable as possible. I put it as cheap as Amazon would let me, so it's like $3 for the Kindle edition.
Hey, we got somebody new here. We got one more order in the kitchen. I'm going to turn the pizza oven back on. Josh, I haven't heard your history before, and would be interested in hearing how your practice developed in such a large business.
Sure.
Now it's seeing so many clients.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of people out in this area, so it was largely unheard of when I started. I basically just volunteered to work for whoever would let me put sensors on their head. Maybe 13, 14 years ago or so. And I decided that the best marketing was good results, because I was naive and young and dumb and didn't know any better. It still worked though. But I made $7,000 in profit my first year, $12,000 in profit my second year, I think $21,000 in profit my third year. And then by my fourth year, it went to about $50,000. And then I started hiring staff after that. And so I haven't actually paid myself much more than that since then, because I'm constantly reinvesting into the company. But now we have, I think, 5 or 6 employees now, and we have all the equipment we could ever want, plus redundancies. And
Joshua, speak to your market, because I don't know where Triona is, but you have, how many practitioners do you have in your building, or did have at one time?
Let's see, Linda, Emma, Michelle, me,
Jesus,
Andrea. I think there's 5 of us. We don't have any interns right now. The university we're partnering with went out of business, basically. So we're kind of short on just like the regular cycle of interns, but we have 5 staff right now. we've got a nurse, we've got 2 therapists, we've got a technician.
But no, Joshua, I'm talking about how many different businesses were in your building. Even on your floor, you had a whole bunch of neurofeedback.
Well, we've launched a lot of like sister clinics. You know, some of them practice in a way that we really respect, and some of them don't. You know,
is that a nice way from saying that you trained up some techs and they left and they started their own business?
Well, not sort of. I mean, some of them were therapists and stuff like that, you know, but
yeah.
But I don't abide. I don't like people cutting corners. I'm not going to get too political on what I don't like, but I really like raw data analysis. I don't like automation. I think people should know what they're looking at in the raw data. And I'm just a real stickler on that, and I'm not gonna let go of that. So, and because I get every month I get reports from somebody else's clinic, not even necessarily locally, but just it's like, you know, it doesn't look good. It's not correct. You know, I'm tired of seeing people train eye blinks. You know,
I was going to say, depending on the market in the Midwest, which is more conservative, versus the coast, which is more progressive, you'll have people's, pardon the pun, minds are more open. No,
I think they're pretty open out here, but they want to hear word of mouth, and so the best results really are good results, or the best marketing is good results. And so it was really just that bulk volunteering, living as a adult married person who was prior military veteran. I had to move into my parents' basement, basically, you know, with my wife, and I had to do that because I couldn't afford rent, because I was running this crazy neurofeedback startup thing. I made so little money I couldn't even afford rent, and I did that for I think like the first 2 years. It was pretty bad. And it was just because I was volunteering most of the hours, but I was committing to working, you know, something like at least 30 hours a week. You know, I was going to put the hours in, even if I had to volunteer, which was my principle. And eventually people were coming in and asking to be seen, and it was more than what I could volunteer. So I started charging new people who were coming in. And as the demand increased, I just started raising the rates more and more. And eventually you have a steady stream of people who are willing to pay you a livable wage. You know, it's just supply and demand. I had excess supply, no demand. As that shifted, because people were telling their friends about the results they were getting, the supply and demand corrected. And now I probably could charge whatever I want, but I'm more in tune with enabling my staff, and I'm more in tune with trying to create educational material for, well, I've been doing it for my staff for a while, but maybe even something like the larger community is what I'm more oriented towards.
And Triona was asking about the marketing, and you already answered it. It's referrals, right?
Yeah, I don't do any marketing. I don't do any advertising. I don't put any money into that at all. It's just pure word of mouth. Yep.
Last question, and we'll split. Is SMR the only thing that can train the hypothalamus?
Well, I think the SMR training is training the sensory motor strip, which is a bunch of neurons kind of along the arch from ear to ear. And it's kind of integrated and ties to a lot of things. When you're a fetus, one of the first groups of cells in your brain to develop is your sensory motor rhythm and the somatosensory rhythm, and everything kind of unfolds from that. I don't know how the deeper structures like the hypothalamus connect to that, how directly or indirectly. I believe that what you might be thinking about with the thalamus or the hypothalamus might be the thalamocortical loop, which is like your alpha, I think. Now, I could be way off on that. So, you know, there'd be room for the Gunkelman to come in here and correct both of us.
What I'm doing is I'm taking screenshots, sending it over to Jay, and we'll talk about it on our Thursday show. And for the people that don't know, we get together every week with our buds, you know, Radar, Hida, and we get all the questions. And if there's something that we need more content on, we go to Jay Gunkelman and Dr. Marie. And that's for our Thursday show. And then if you have any other questions, I know of a good technological group on Facebook. Anthony, do you know what that is?
Yeah. So thank you, Pete. And yeah, science and technology discoveries. And we're always trying to learn new things, as Josh is doing. So it's always educational to be on here. So I appreciate it, guys.
In these groups, by the way. So it is worth joining.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. That's really nice to hear. I appreciate it. So yes. And good luck on your class. And
Thank
Pete,
you.
good luck.
Yeah. It'll be something I'm working on for probably another year. though I suspect
Maybe a
I'll
while.
have something to release in a few months.
Okay. Yeah. Preliminary. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. You and I will talk earlier than that. We'll collaborate a little earlier.
Yeah. Feel free to message. I appreciate it.
Joshua Radar, thank you for showing up once again. We've become less dumb in neurofeedback. Thank you.
And Tita too, and everyone else. Thank you.
Everybody. Triona, thank you for showing up.
Triona.
All right, guys. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.